I have several short stories to read today. This will be different, I think, than what you normally get here. This is fiction. The first one is called A Perfect Plan by Mundt. As she slid off his knife, she dragged all his anger away with her, and then he felt nothing. Well, not exactly nothing. He felt screwed. Vicky's blood ran down the blade and dripped off the point onto her body, now lying on the kitchen floor at his feet. No, not really the point of the blade, Bobby noticed. The point of the blade had broken off somewhere inside Vicky, probably on a rib. He hadn't meant to kill her, not that she hadn't had it coming. He'd had a real bad day at the warehouse and on deliveries, an even worse day with his co-workers and his customers. And worst of all, he'd almost punched out his boss, except he'd backed down, like always. And that made him feel like his shriveled balls were nailed on his boss's trophy wall, right next to the guy's perfect 300 bowling game trophy. So today wasn't a good day for Vicky to spring on him that she was pregnant. They'd already agreed they wouldn't have kids. Bobby had been totally upfront about kids. Sure, he'd marry her if she wanted in a year or two when he got his feet on the ground, but no kids. And then she goes and stops taking the pill without telling him, and boom, there's a kid on the way, his kid. And she starts right in leaning on him about getting married right away, like this weekend. She shouldn't have pushed him, but she shined at pushing, and most of the time she acted like she had his balls nailed to the wall over their headboard, on her side of the bed, of course. So either shit or get off the pot, Bobby, she'd yelled, hands on hips, glaring at him. What's it gonna be? Bobby dropped the knife, which bounced off her bare belly and clattered to the floor. She kept staring at the ceiling. He felt panic start to slice up his gut. Yeah, now he was really screwed. He bent down and grabbed Vicky's ankles and dragged her to the back door, then stopped. A trail of blood streaked across the kitchen floor. The knife still lay next to the pool of blood at the end of the trail. He went back and got the knife, then slipped the blade into the low waistband of Vicky's jeans. He grabbed the doorknob, then stopped again. Shit. He should dig a grave first, before he started dragging her body around the yard. He took his hand off the doorknob, leaving a slop of blood behind. Shit. He had to remember to clean everything he touched. But first he needed a shovel. Or maybe he should cut up the body first, in which case he needed a saw. But then blood would get on everything, so he needed to cut the body up in the bathtub upstairs. No, wait. What he really needed was a 55-gallon drum of acid. No, wait, shit. Where was he going to get acid? He needed to get his propane torch out of the garage and burn off her fingertips and her face and her tattoos, and then cut up her body and then bury the pieces separately in the woods south of town, and then clean the blood out of the bathtub and the bathroom and the stairs and the kitchen, and then bury the knife. No, wait. Maybe he should keep the knife, since it was part of a set, and if one went missing, then it would call attention to itself, except that the point had broken off inside her, and shit. He didn't know what to do with the knife. Except for sure he'd have to say that she'd gone out somewhere, he didn't know where, and just never come back. Just disappeared. Women disappeared all the time. She must have been kidnapped, maybe murdered by Satanists, so they could use the body for human sacrifice rituals and... No, wait, shit. He probably shouldn't mention the baby at all. Keep it simple, stupid. Yes, kiss. He giggled at the thought of kissing Vicky now. What's the best way to clean off blood? He knew the cops had ways to find blood traces. He watched CSI. He stared at his hands clutching Vicky's ankles, blood smearing her skin, his fingerprints on her skin. Shit. What else didn't he know? He stared at the bloody boot prints on the floor. Shit. Okay, so, dump her in the woods, call her in missing, clean up. No, wait, clean up first, Then call her in missing, but call it in right away or wait a day or two. How long did it take to cut up a body? And should he say that everything had been going great between them, or should he give her a motive for leaving, say she'd been kind of restless lately? No. He closed his eyes, forced his thoughts to stop swirling. No cutting, no burying, no Satanists. That kind of shit never worked anyways. Hell, he was her boyfriend. He lived with her. He would be the first one the cops looked at, maybe the only one, and they'd find the body sure as shit. They'll find evidence. They'd find whole, and they'd find the body sure as shit. They'd find evidence. They'd find holes in his story. They'd figure it all out pretty quick. He watched court TV and cops. Shit. Now he was really, truly 100% grade A screwed with a capital S. Why the fuck hadn't he just knocked her around a little instead of killing her? So, what to do? He needed a plan, a good plan. No loose ends. Hell, he needed a great plan. He stared at her belly, the knife stuck in her waistband, the handle making an X with her hip bone, and he wished she wasn't dead. Really wished he hadn't killed her when just like that, the plan came to him. Simple and doable and perfect. He dropped Vicky's legs with a thump and then went upstairs to get his pistol. Bobby peeked around the corner of the 7-Eleven into the alley, then pulled his head back. Darryl sat in his police car, like always, probably eating cheese fries. Bobby looked at his watch. 11:14 p.m. Didn't matter, really. The town of Newton rolled up the sidewalks at about 10. Bobby felt the bricks prickle his back through his skin as he leaned against the wall. He didn't look forward to this, but he couldn't think of any other way to fix everything. He took a deep breath and slipped around the corner. The 7-Eleven's dumpster smelled like a son of a bitch, the stink like a force field, and Bobby walked wide around it, making for the driver's side of the police car. Darryl had his window down. Bobby smelled cheese fries. He grinned. Good old predictable Darryl. Bobby lifted his pistol until the muzzle touched Darryl right behind his left ear. Darryl twitched and started to turn and speak. Bobby pulled the trigger before he could see Darryl's eyes. The shot sounded like a cough. Trace evidence splattered all over the inside of the car like a bouquet of bloody flowers. Darryl slumped over, sprawled across his computer console. Bobby opened the driver's door. The idiot alarm went off. Bong, 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 because Darryl still had his keys in the ignition. Bobby jumped at the sound and banged his head on the doorframe. The pistol went off again, shooting Darryl through the leg. The shot flashed like lightning and sounded much louder confined inside the car. Shit, said Bobby. He jerked the keys out of the ignition and the bonging stopped. He took Darryl's revolver and shotgun, then closed the door. He stood next to the car and listened for a minute, clutching Darryl's shotgun and pistol against his chest with his left arm. He heard nothing. Okay, that hadn't been so bad. He started walking the 2 blocks to Sheriff Galt's house. He figured no one would stop him. By 11, everyone in Newton had usually already fallen asleep, and even if anyone did see him walking around with 2 pistols and a shotgun, he knew he was doing something that no one, absolutely no one in Newton could possibly figure out. His plan was that good. People left their doors unlocked in Newton, so when he got to the sheriff's house, he just walked right in. He didn't turn on the lights. He let his eyes get used to the quiet darkness before he crept up the stairs to the bedrooms. The sheriff and his wife Marge didn't wake up while he stood over their bed. He knew they had a kid down the hall in another bedroom, maybe 11 or 12. Gary, he thought the kid's name was, so he didn't want to make any unnecessary noise. He slipped a cushion out from under the sheriff's pants on a chair next to the bed. He pressed it over Sheriff Galt's face, pushing the muzzle into it and firing through the padding. Surprisingly, the idea worked pretty well. A little flash, a little thump, and he pulled the cushion away, and Sheriff Galt's head looked like... Well, Bobby didn't see any point in dwelling on what Sheriff Galt's head looked like anymore. Next, he did Marge Galt. Flash, thump. He left the cushion covering her face. He didn't need a cushion for Gary, because there was no one left to hear anything. He closed the front door behind him. He just eliminated Newton's entire law enforcement community and armed himself with another shotgun and pistol to boot. So, with no investigators, there could be no Vicki Ann Rowland's murder investigation. Except, there was always Ethel Clack. She was Sheriff Galt's secretary, the department's dispatcher. She was a cop, almost. At least she knew how to dial the state police. And Dr. Davis, too, he did coroner's kind of stuff, wrote out death certificates. He had written out Bobby's mother's certificate 2 years back. He knew cop stuff, too. But neither of them lived far away. No one lived far away from anyone else in Newton. Bobby started walking. Killing Vicky's mother was a no-brainer. Mrs. Rollins had never liked Bobby anyways. She always told Vicky that she could do better. And this was when Bobby was standing right there in the room with them. He let Mrs. Rollins wake up before he did her, and the shotgun, with more shells than were strictly necessary, but there was, after all, a certain amount of personal feeling involved with Mrs. Rollins. 12:21 clicked over on Mrs. Rollins' bedside clock as Bobby's hand stopped vibrating from the shotgun blasts. He took stock of his evening. Vicky, Darrell, Sheriff Galt, Marge, Gary, Ethel, Dr. Davis, Harold Standish, the editor and publisher of the Newton Fantagraph Leader, Jim Kastner, a part-timer at the Fantagraph Leader who fancied himself an investigative reporter, Fred Alton, the radio guy. He'd popped Davy Spender in the 7-Eleven because he wanted something to drink, and Davy saw the blood and the guns, and, well, why the hell not by that point? They always overcharged the 7-Eleven anyways. He'd done Heather, Dr. Davis's nurse, because she was bound to notice that Dr. Davis was dead. Then he did the 3 volunteer firemen, Bill, Johnny, and that other guy. So they wouldn't do any clever emergency stuff, and okay, that added up to what, 15? No, 16. He'd done Carl the postman too because he figured Carl was a Fed, and federal involvement was a complication he didn't need. But he didn't need to kill everyone in town. That would be just crazy. There just had to be no one left alive that could finger him, who could say that he and Vicky didn't always get along great, who could even identify him, and then he would fall between the cracks. So he really only needed to kill anyone who knew him. Which, when he thought about it, was pretty much everyone in town. Shit. Okay. New plan. Kill everyone. He fired up Dr. Davis's Lincoln Town car. He'd gotten tired of walking. And besides, he had a couple of dozen guns by now. Too many to carry. The doc also had a Newton phone book in his car, which was a stroke of luck. Bobby opened it on the passenger seat. Abrams, Donald. Bobby smiled. Donnie Abrams was his boss. Small towns didn't come much smaller than Newton, until you started working your way through it person by person. The Welcome to Newton sign at the town line read population 283, and that was probably accurate, give or take. Bobby crossed off names in the phone book until he got to Thomas Yarnell. No Z's in Newton. He'd never noticed that before. He could bury Vicky's mother in a whole bunch of Vicky's murder in a whole bunch of other murders, so that no one would be able to put it all together. Because none of it would make any fucking sense at all, like half a dozen slasher movies all spliced together into one. He smiled. Christ, what a great plan. Except, he remembered that guy on CSI who could use goddamn bugs to figure out time of death, and that would lead to timelines, and timelines would be like arrows pointing right at Vicky and him. Shit. Okay, new plan. Get rid of all the evidence. Yeah, he reached forward to start up the Lincoln, then stopped. Except that the amount of evidence had sort of mushroomed on him, in the past few hours, and his inability to get rid of the evidence for Vicky's murder alone had been the reason for his plan in the first place. Shit. He leaned back in the driver's seat. He couldn't bury 283 dead bodies in the woods south of town. Or could he? No, he couldn't. And in a million years he couldn't clean up all the blood either. He hadn't exactly been stingy with the shotgun. And then when he found the chainsaw at Earl Toohey's place, well, he just hadn't been able to resist supersizing the carnage because he knew his plan, and chaos was his friend. So what could he do? He thought about it, and just like that, okay, new plan. He grinned. He fired up the Lincoln. The highway looked empty from the gas station. The sun brightened the sky behind the low hills east of town. Okay, the plan had now been set in motion. Time for him to make himself scarce. He pulled the Lincoln away from the pumps. He hadn't particularly wanted to kill the kid working in the gas station, but the plan didn't allow for any deviation. He hit the on-ramp just as the sun topped the hills, and the sudden glare blinded him. He never saw the SUV speeding down the hill until the last second. A horn blared. The SUV swerved into the other lane and kept going, doing 90 at least. Shit, said Bobby, horsing the Lincoln onto the shoulder and screeching to a stop. Just then the firebombs, all made from the gasoline he'd taken from the gas station after he'd killed the kid, started to go off in Newton. Booming explosions Bobby felt rock the Lincoln. The driver of the SUV must have seen the explosions. His brake lights flashed once, but he didn't stop. Okay, so maybe using firebombs to burn up all the evidence wasn't such a great idea. 30 or 40 explosions had rippled through the ground by now. The SUV driver could hardly have missed it, and he could probably identify Bobby's car, too, coming out of town just as all hell broke loose. The Doc's Lincoln was lime green, after all, with vanity plates that said, "Look at me." Shit. Okay, new plan. Bobby had 62 guns, maybe 1,000 rounds of ammunition, a couple of spare firebombs, some acid he'd picked up for the hell of it, and a chainsaw in the trunk. He floored the Lincoln and took off after that SUV. Newton fireballed into the sky in his rearview mirror. The end. The Window by Martin Mundt. You stare out the 40th floor window of the meeting room. You stare at the building across the street, at the Sears Tower in the distance, at the cloudless blue sky behind everything. Johnson drones on about projections from the head of the table. You don't care about projections, or profit and loss statements, or even investor confidence indices. Instead, you devoutly wish a plague of seizures upon Johnson and all his kind. Or not. You find it difficult to care. You stare out the window. Johnson drones on. It occurs to you that there must have been a time when you did care. Perhaps that caring time had seemed at the time like a happier time, but you cannot imagine, here with your rear end numb to your seat, in what possible way it could have been happy. Your heart pumps indifference through your veins like thick, dirty oil. And so you decide. You stand up. Johnson drones on about his new hyper-mathematical proof of the elastic nature of quantum foam, which is odd, since although you are fairly certain that your company makes exfoliating bath foam, you are absolutely certain that it does not make hyper-mathematical quantum foam. Lasky, however, to your right, and Rajiv to your left, do not stop listening. You shrug. You do not care. You take a running start and crash through the window, the double-paned, thermally sealed, floor-to-ceiling, unbreakable glass panes. You hang momentarily in midair, 40 stories above the ground. The sun reflects 1,000 times off 1,000 mirrored windows, like 1,000 days passing all at once. And then gravity embraces you with an almost audible sigh. You fall. That is to say, you plunge headfirst to what will certainly be your certain death in an instantaneously decelerated lump of human meat on the sidewalk below. You squirt blood from 1,000 cuts, the shards of window glass buried in your flesh, quivering in the howling slipstream, scraping nerve ends like 1,000 cheese graters. You plummet. Your heart twists and writhes and flaps like a torn parachute. You become nothing but a runaway adrenal gland, hurtling without brakes down rails of wind. You windmill your arms, tearing the air to rags around you. Your bloody, red, shredded, 100% cotton shirt flutters from your forearms like shattered wings. The wind tears at your hair, flaps your eyelids against your eyelids, batters your screams back down your throat like used vomit. A spot on the sidewalk grows larger and larger. You are just beginning to think that maybe this wasn't such a good idea when your head jerks up. You suck in a sharp gasp of breath, your eyes pop open, you wake up. Johnson drones on about the virtues of various risk management strategies. To your left, Rajiv twirls a quarter from finger to finger, first left to right, then right to left, like a practicing magician. Perhaps he noticed you falling asleep. Perhaps he didn't. You don't care. Johnson's monotone flattens with excitement as he refers you to Chart F, but he only succeeds in conveying a palpably counterproductive hypnotic state. You do not care about Johnson's presentation. You do not care about Johnson. You do not care about Johnson's thoughts or analyses or dreams or feelings or even whether he lives or dies. You remember crashing through the window in search of that long ago, far-away time when you were happy. The memory recedes into the mists of indifference. Your life, when you can generate the merest scintilla of a flicker of interest in it, is little more than huge chunks of disappointment glued together with the spittle of frustration. You stare out the window. Johnson drones on about the religious symbolism of food preparation in the Canterbury Tales. You do not care. You stand up and sprint at the window, shatter it with a sound like the woodwind section of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra being flattened by an L train. Pieces of broken glass explode around you, glinting in the sunlight like a halo of gold and diamonds. You dive into the canyon of skyscrapers. That is to say, you plummet like the woodwind section of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra pitched out a window. You quickly accelerate towards the center of the earth. To dive or plummet, that is the question. The crucial difference lies tangled in the concept of free will. If you do indeed possess free will, then you will be able to stop the downward tendency of a dive. On the other hand, if you lack free will, then you will continue to plummet whether you want to or not. Therefore, you flap your arms experimentally and think very hard thoughts about stopping. But of course, you do not stop. You always suspected that this free will thing was nothing but a load of horse manure. Regrettably, the confirmation of your suspicions does not bring you any satisfaction. You continue to plummet, a thrashing lump of human meat that has spent decades kidding itself that it's in control of its own destiny, when in reality it is apparently predestined to become a catastrophically rearranged lump of human meat twitching upon contact with the sidewalk. Perhaps, far above, Johnson has leapt after you, but you do not care. You plummet. You suddenly realize that the popular conception of death as a skeletally spectral figure caped and hooded, shrouded in an aura of dread and mystery, wielding a scythe, is wrong. Death is instead a sidewalk. Frankly, you consider the concept of death incarnated as a sidewalk as a disappointment and a bit insulting. You might at least have hoped for some answers from a spectral figure, enigmatic answers perhaps, but tangible. But a sidewalk? How typically disappointing. The tide of shadows rises up the sides of the buildings, slowly snuffing out the sun's 1,000 reflections. You do not want to die as a disassembled lump of human meat on a sidewalk. Perhaps, just perhaps, you care after all. You try to think even harder about not plummeting anymore. The slipstream around you seems infinitesimally lessened. Somehow you grasp the hope that at the last possible second you will save yourself. Your outspread arms will somehow transform into wings and seize the air, and you will then soar on sunlit spirals of updrafts into the blue sky, a lump of human meat no more. The sidewalk rushes up to meet you. Slower, you think, perhaps just a little slower than before. If given time, you snort. Your chin jerks up from your chest. Your eyes snap open. You wake up again. Johnson drones on. Rajiv twirls his quarters. Lasky sips water. You simply cannot conceive how Horatio Alger forced himself to keep at it day after day, week after week, year after year. Johnson's words begin to blend with the low, ever-present hum of the ductwork. Whether this means that the machinery is becoming more Johnson-like, or that Johnson is becoming more duct-like, you do not know. You stare out the window. You suddenly realize that, as horrifically sterile, pointless, immaterial, and frustrating as your dreams are, they are still a damn sight better than Johnson on his best day. Johnson drones on about the exciting opportunities available in the current global exchange rate climate. You stand and rush at the window. You strike the glass at full speed, leading with your face. The glass does not break. You bounce off the window with a dull thud that reverberates through all your bones. The glass shivers, resonating with a low tone. You snort blood past the vicious pain in your nose. You blink. You stare out the window at the building across the street, at the Sears Tower in the distance, at the blue, cloudless sky behind everything. All of it hangs right in front of you. You lurch forward again. You know the glass will break this time. You know it. At the last moment, you fling your forehead at the window as hard as you can in your best imitation kung fu action hero headbutt, whip-snapping your spine like a bullwhip in order to focus every last ounce of energy you can muster on crack. The glass does not break. You bounce off. You sway in front of the window, your inner ears like two gyros working against each other, a fiery pain, spider webs across your forehead. Your stomach turns inside out with queasiness. You slam your face against the window again. You bash your face, you smash your face against the unbreakable, thermally sealed, double-paned glass. You hear your forehead crack and crack again and again until the bone feels soft. Your teeth loosen in your gums. The bridge of your glasses slices into your nose. A lens pops out and falls into the floor. You do not care. You smack your face into the glass again and again and again. It is all right there, right in front of you. But the glass does not break. You catch your breath, sucking in air through your mouth. You drool blood down your chin. You do not hear Johnson. You do not hear anyone. Funny, they are the ones who seem stunned, but they don't know. They don't see, they don't feel, they don't understand, they don't think, they don't care. You, on the other hand, pile-driving your head repeatedly into the unforgiving glass, seem perfectly lucid to yourself. In fact, you think you have never behaved in a more lucid manner in your entire life. You take a deep breath and charge. Your face cracks against the glass like a gunshot, and then again and again, crack, 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 as fast as a pistol being emptied in a panic. Crack, crack. Blood splatters in a star pattern on the window. A blurry image of your face appears on the glass in smeared blood, staring back lopsided at you as if it were hanging on just the other side of the glass, waiting for you to join it. You ignore the pain, but your legs buckle. You collapse to your knees. You sway left, then right, a slow pendulum. Your glasses have broken off. The world is a blur, but you know that the building across the street is still there, along with the Sears Tower and the blue, blue sky. You thud your face into the You thud your face into the window with all your remaining strength. Your cheekbones shatter. Your front teeth break. You swallow the pieces like sharp aspirin. You pound your bloody, sledge-hammered, pulpy stump of a face against the window. The window does not break. You sag against the glass, which cools your skin. Your face squeaks along the window as you slide to the floor. You close your eyes. Your face goes splat on the carpet. The shag drives itself like 1,000 needles into your wounds. You feel hands lift you, carry you. The feeling is nothing at all like flying. You know for certain that you are going to lose this job, just like all the others. You do not care. The end.
Welcome to my world, oh, the mighty night, oh,
Munchkins by Martin Mundt. So, okay, I went to this horror convention a while back, and one of the celebrities who made an appearance was one of the Munchkins from The Wizard of Oz. And I figured there must be something seriously wrong with me, since I really shouldn't have wanted to see a real live Munchkin as much as I did, but I kind of did. And when I walked past his table, he looked kind of sluggish and thin, but I figured he must have been about 104 years old, so I just felt kind of sad for him. And there was this long line of people waiting to talk to him, and I thought, there's really something badly twisted with our country if this is the way we treat our Munchkins, forcing them to sit in hotel ballrooms in 68-year-old clothes while signing autographs for spare change. I mean, what kind of shallow, barren culture forces a national treasure like a Munchkin to sit sandwiched between screaming lords such as first cousin and unauthorized biographer on one side, and an Elvira impersonator on the other side? Maybe she was a Cher impersonator, I couldn't tell exactly. Have we sunk so low as a society that we will happily exploit Munchkins in their golden years for monetary gain? Well, I, for one, say no. And after I'd gotten his autograph, and had my picture taken with him, and bought a copy of his memoirs, I Used to Be Somebody, and signed up for his newsletter, Munchkin Bits, and purchased a ticket in the raffle to win a date with him, and got myself a t-shirt with honorary Munchkin printed on it, and snipped off a lock of his hair, and bought his 12-inch action figure, and his car air freshener, and his plush toy, and his commemorative set of highball coasters, and issues 1 through 12 of his limited edition collector's comic book series entitled Pope Munchkin Dragon Battle, and of course his newest CD I just had to leave in protest of the naked, grasping commercialism of it all. And as I was walking to my car, I happened to pass the hotel's loading dock, and I saw this big circus wagon, the kind they keep lions or tigers or bears in, parked at the dock, and when I pulled back a flap of the tarpaulin that covered it, there were like half a dozen more Munchkins inside, all of them really old, and I couldn't tell them apart since they all looked exactly like the Munchkin inside, and they were all skinny and dirty, growling and hissing and baring their remaining teeth at me, and they shied away from the sunlight, and there was a bright blue Munchkin suit with a big yellow button lying in the far corner, except it was empty and surrounded by whole piles of really, really little bones covered with teeth marks. And I felt really sad for them because they seemed so hungry and neglected, and I also felt ashamed of humanity for exploiting these poor, simple creatures, and this piercing sense of guilt split my heart in two. So I tossed them half a pack of gum. The end.
I got the